In today's video, I'm sharing 3 creative ways to use decoupage this Christmas as part of the Creating Through the Seasons playlist event where I am teaming up with 10 other amazing creators to get you inspired this holiday season using my own personal product line, TDS Creative. I am so grateful to have so many talented creators want to be a part of this and inspire you with these products. And people, you're not going to want to miss it. Next time you're in Dollar Tree, head on over to the Crafty Square section and grab you some of these styrofoam Christmas tree pieces. Let's be real here. They are meant for Christmas trees, period. I mean, I've tried to use them for other things, but let's just be realistic. They are in the shape of a tree. You know what I'm saying? We're going to apply some gesso onto the top of these. I love to use gesso as a base on styrofoam whenever I'm going to decoupage something. Styrofoam has like those little bitty gaps. You know what I'm saying? And gesso is pretty thick, and when you apply this, it will fill in those gaps, giving you a very smooth finish. And there's other ways you can go about this. And if you don't like this idea, just use regular paint and decoupage, completely up to you. This is just how I roll on with decoupaging styrofoam. I would recommend, if you're going to use acrylic gesso, do 2 or 3 coats, but for the sake of time, I just applied 1 on here and I think the end result was really good. For the decoupage portion, I'm going to grab one of my TDS Creative A4 rice paper designs. I'll often get asked like what size is A4. It's realistically just a smidge bigger than a regular sheet of paper. That's really it, just a smidge. Not much, just a smidge. We're going to wrap this around our cone. And I got 2 pieces of paper because really one just does the job for each cone. And I cut them down to size. Now they're not going to line up in the back, and I was completely okay with that. If that's a problem for you, then you might want to do like section by section, but you'll see in the end result, it's barely noticeable that they are not completely lined up. For our medium, I'm going to use some good old Mod Podge, and to apply our piece, I'm going to use one of my TDS Creative artist brushes. This is in the fan style. I'm applying a nice healthy layer to a large section of the cone. That gesso is a really nice barrier, so the Mod Podge is sitting right on top of that, and it's going to allow us to attach that rice paper really easily. You can apply the rice paper at this point. If you want to leave it dry, you go right ahead. I'm taking my water bottle and giving the back of the rice paper a little spritzy spritz. This, for me, just helps make it a little bit more manipulatable. You do not have to do that. I'm using a dry kitchen sponge. I get these at Walmart in a pack, and I just cut them up. And whenever I'm doing something that is circular or cylinder shape, whatever you want to call it, this helps me to press it down and go around instead of like using a brayer. That can be difficult. And sometimes cling wrap, it can tear and it can get sticky. So the sponge is a method I've been using for a long time. You can utilize whatever tools you would like and use whatever method you would like to apply your rice paper. When I was happy with the piece, everything was all dry. I cut the rice paper down to size to fit the cone. I didn't want to leave our trees plain, so I grabbed some of my little ornaments that I also have available on my website. These are really, really rustic, and they're unfinished little wood ornaments. So I wanted to apply a layer of Mod Podge over the top of them and put one of my TDS Dry Rub On transfers onto them for a little decorative accent. Whenever I want to put a transfer on a really rough piece of wood and I don't feel like sanding it, putting a sealer over it first really helps. For the base of the trees, I'm going to use these larger wood slices, and I grabbed a circular dowel that we're going to need to bring on in the miter shears and cut down for our tree trunk. Yeah, tree trunk, tree base, right? Cut it down, and I didn't need to cut a whole lot because we're just going to shove it right on up the bottom of that tree with some glue and then glue it right on down. We don't actually have to put the rod all the way up to get it to work. To cover up the base, I just grabbed some messy moss. You can absolutely put whatever you would like down here. This is just how I chose to go about this. I then grabbed my traditional Christmas transfer set and picked out 2 little ornament pieces and rubbed them on our wood slice ornaments once the Mod Podge was completely dry. I grabbed some twine and then attached them onto our piece, and really, really love how these turned out. Decoupage is a great way to upcycle and transform teapots. I had this one laying around that I picked up recently from an estate sale. It didn't have a lid and I wasn't really crazy about the colors. I'm like, this one right here. Now to start off, we're going to apply a layer of multi-surface paint onto this. The ceramic is shiny. There are several different ways you can tackle this. This is not the end all be all, but I do like multi-surface for a base coat on ceramic. Now, here is where your catch-22 comes in, people, okay? You're going to need like a lot of coats of that if you want to cover over something with a design. So to X-nay all that extra work, I'm just taking some of my Waverly white chalk paint and then going over the multi-surface. Now you might be asking yourself, Brandy, why not just use the chalk paint? Because it's been in my experience that if I use that as a base on something shiny, it will peel up. The multi-surface, I don't have that problem so much. For the decoupage portion, I'm going to be using one of my TDS Creative Decoupage tissue papers. These are really large and they are super thin. I decided to take a little bit of water on a paintbrush and just trim out the sections that I wanted. I went with large pieces for this. You could absolutely do some patchwork and do the smaller designs. This is just how I chose to go about this. I would like to do another teapot down the line, do some patchwork with some smaller sections and see what that looks like. Now we're gonna get a little artsy fartsy and I'm grabbing one of my clay molds. This is just one that I picked up off Amazon. It was probably a couple bucks. It might even be down in my description link. And my favorite clay, for anyone that is going to ask, is called paper clay, at least at the current moment. That is not what this is. This is actually some generic stuff I have off to the side. I am out of paper clay. I've just been using this right now. Taking a little bit of my Type On Quick and Thick and applying on the back and then pressing our clay pieces gingerly to not mess up the design that we created with the clay. And then I had a little snowflake mold and I got this joint off Temu for anyone interested. And I added some little snowflake pieces to our teapot spout, the little front piece, and I allowed these to dry for about 24 hours, roughly. Probably not the full 24, but you get where I'm going with this. For our medium, I'm going to be using some good old Mod Podge. For our application, I'm going to be using one of my TDS Creative brushes in the fan style. And to help me apply our piece, we're just going to be using a dry kitchen sponge. And I picked these up in a pack from Walmart. I've been told recently you can get them from Dollar Tree. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen them at Dollar Tree. To apply our piece, I'm using a little bit of water to spritz on the back of our tissue paper. You don't have to. If you want to apply yours dry, you can absolutely do that. I feel like this helps me manipulate the paper a little bit. Just be gentle. The problem I run into whenever I'm doing something cylinder shape, circle like this, is that your tissue paper, especially if you're not doing patchwork and you're doing larger designs, it bunches on the side and then there's a ton of wrinkling, and a lot of people hate that. I don't mind a little bit of wrinkles, but one way to combat that is in the sections you notice that there's a big ripple. Take your scissors, put it up where that ripple is, snip it, and then gingerly overlap the two pieces. Then you can come back in with some Mod Podge. See how I'm just kind of pulling the sections back up, or whatever sealer medium you want to use, and then just apply it. Once it's dry, it should look like that. On the opposite side, I used the Nutcracker design and applied our piece using the same technique. And here I did not speed it up. I really wanted y'all to see, especially if you're a beginner or even if you're a seasoned decoupager and you struggle with certain things, just the amount of time it takes when you're doing this, the attention to care. Okay, for the videos, I'll speed it up a lot of times and you guys get to see like how quickly it's being done, but realistically, I'm really taking my time. It took me hours to work on this little teapot, so don't let the video fool you with the short footage. I'm going to use some of Dixie Belle's gold gilding wax for our accent color. Absolutely use whatever accent color you would like. This is just how I chose to go about this. Now I started by just trimming off the majority of the spout and the handle. And before I finished it off, I wanted to touch up and blend in the decoupage paper. And I like to do that by taking the same background paint color and using, you can use whatever kind of brush you want. In this case, I decided to use a stippling brush and blend in the paint to our decoupage tissue paper. And I will do that by just adding a little bit of that paint onto the end of the brush and just tappity tap 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 in all around the edge of that decoupage tissue paper. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to do was to create a texture on this. And there's multiple different ways you can create a texture, but a super simple way, because chalk paint already has its own thickness, is to tappity tap 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 it onto your piece. That's going to give you just a small amount of texture. If you want a large amount of texture, add baking soda, you can add some calcium carbonate, and then go from there. This again is just the technique that I wanted to use. I did this all around the edge and all around the rest of the teapot. And then I noticed this. I must not have been paying attention when I sat this down while it was wet, and there were pieces of the decoupage tissue paper torn right off. So to combat that, I just took some of that paint and started tappity tap tap tapping around the design, and then dry brushing everything inward to give it a purposeful look. I was so not happy with this. I was like, you know what, we just won't show this side. It turned out okay on that side, but it, you know, meh. Santa it is. And here's a little close-up of how that dries. Remember how I said, you know, it's just a little bit of texture with the chalk paint, tappity tap 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 in. It's not huge, but on pieces like this, especially when you're decoupaging and not everything's completely even, that little bit of texture can really help blend things in. I took the gilding wax and then went over the whole piece, and think that this teapot is really something special. Dollar Tree had these little metal carts for fall this season, and I picked one up. Now, people, I was not happy about the $7 price tag, but I really wanted to utilize this for Christmas. So I sucked up that $7, put it in the cart, and here we are. Okay, we're going to use some of my folk art multi-surface and give this a nice coat to get a base on here. I really like using multi-surface for bases whenever it comes to like porcelain, ceramic, metal, glass. Just works really well for me. Now I'm going to go over this with some Waverly chalk paint, because a lot of times whenever you use the multi-surface, while it's a good base because it sticks to those pieces well, you usually gotta do like 3, 4, or 5 coats of coverage, and that's too much work. When I was all happy with our base coats, I grabbed some Mod Podge to decoupage our TDS Creative A4 rice paper onto here. Now you can absolutely go about this however you would like. I took 2 pieces of this design and used my fingers to press around our wagon or cart, whatever you want to call this, and then trim it down to size. A lot of times I'll flip it over on the back because I can see the creases better, and then I'll cut a little excess. I took our Mod Podge and applied a layer on the side after I had our pieces all cut down, and then just started patching the pieces together. Now for something like this, and those of you who have problems with designs lining up, you know, there's that. These did not line up, but you'll see in the end result, you can hardly tell. And if you want, you can always dry brush some color over it. I think that this turned out really amazing, even though the designs weren't exactly aligned. But since the paper and the pattern were kind of all the same, you know what I mean? It worked out for me. Once I had the sides done, I then came in on the fronts and folded a piece to where the sides ended and folded it back, so this way I could cut it down into size and then put this right onto the front of the cart. I was going to take a little bit of antique Waverly wax and do like, you know, a little bit of weathering all over the piece, rustic it up a bit. And I decided against that and was like, you know what, we're just going to take some black paint and trim this joint up. I went around the bottom and the top and really love how it helped those details in the rice paper pop out. There are so many ways you could actually use this wagon as well as decorate the piece. I decided to kind of create a little scene right on the top and add some vintage pieces with some messy moss. Why not? You know, love the messy moss. And of course, I popped some lights right on here as well. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Don't forget to check out the playlist link below. Share some love to the DIY community that is taking the time out of their busy schedules to help me bring you some amazing inspiration using my TDS creative products. And if you're interested in trying my product line, you can click the link down below. There is a link, I'll put this in the comments for you. There's also one down in the description box, or just type in Google thediystruggle.com. And a huge thank you to those of you at home who have been following me along this journey since I started TDS Creative about 2 years ago. It means the world to me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, from me and my family. I appreciate you so much. And again, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time.